I think perhaps Verdi honestly believed he had not been influenced by Wagner, but I think it's pretty clear that he was in those later works.
Well, I guess, just trying to link it back to your question and the idea of how might it affect how you design the piece. Or, certainly one of the things one would want to do is try and find a way to make the piece flow in some way without inhibiting the narrative, so that piece can be told in a very, very clear and a very logical way, and that you don't stop the piece in some way. Although that's almost a rule of mine in any operatic situation, is never to hold things up by a change of scenery that you sit there for 5 minutes while the curtain's down waiting for a set to be changed.
And lose all sense of...
Yeah, you lose the energy that's being built up from the performers, and the orchestra somehow dissipates if you're sitting there too long. A little while's okay, but too long it's a problem.
Yeah.
So, for example, between Act 3 and Act 4 of Otello, we are going to have a smallish pause in order to change the scenery to get from Act 3 to Act 4. But it's been designed in such a way that hopefully it can be effective very, very quickly, and without you sitting there too long in order to lose the energy of everything that's been built up before.
Good for you.
But certainly if you would have had to have the curtain down, go out, have a drink, come back in for an Act 4, which is only, 20
minutes or so.
20 minutes or so, would, I think, be a disaster. So certainly one wants to kind of go with that to help the way that the drama is being told. So that's one of the ways, I guess you could say, might be influenced by the music. I think our way of looking at it visually, in a way, is quite... There's a sort of a cinematic realism about what we're going to do with this production, the set. That they have a realistic quality about them as locations, and a believable set of places that this story can unfold in. It's not particularly theatrical in the sense of very painted flats or footlights, and a very obvious sense that you're aware of this piece taking place.
That we're in an artificial environment.
Yeah, I think what we're creating is hopefully a very believable, claustrophobic world in which these events take place, which you're an observer on, rather than being overtly theatrical about a singer standing in a follow spot downstage centre performing to the audience, while something vaguely is around them, and sometimes that's okay. I know, depending on what the piece is, sometimes you accept the theatricality of the art form and you work with that and you exploit that to become something interesting.
One of the terms that I've heard used by some of the folks around the company to describe this set for Otello is steampunk. That it sort of has a hard metallic Victorianism about it. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, funny enough, I've heard that expression only once before from a colleague, another director in England, actually, when we were discussing something else. I think it's a movement, isn't it? There's some kind of movement that was to do with...
We'll have to ask the camera.
It was sort of enjoying... It was something to do with reinventing and exploring a particular time in the Victorian era, and to do with a certain technology of the time. Yes, I guess the kind of actual period in which we're setting the piece is... There's not a specific date, but I would say it's any time from the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. We're somehow in the first decade, or the first 10 to 15 years of the 20th century, rather than the mid to late Victorian era. But certainly what it is it's taking place, well, in a way, it's what the libretto says, in the sense that it's taking place on a fortress. But our fortress happens to be an iron-plated, multi-leveled fort, which the idea that it's sea-locked, in the sense that it's one of the references I looked at with Tim Albury for inspiration. There's some forts in the English Channel, which were built in the 19th century during the Napoleonic Wars to protect the English fleet from the French fleet.
Right.
And they still exist, although they were sort of updated and upgraded during the centuries, and were used in later wars as well. And they were these giant sort of often circular or square isolated ironclad fortresses in the middle of the ocean. The only way you could arrive on these things was by boat, and the only way you could get off it was by boat. And
sort of like a fortified lighthouse, almost.
Yes, almost like that. And they were very attractive in the sense that the idea in the Shakespeare play and in Verdi's Otello, I think exploited more in Verdi's Otello than Shakespeare's, is the sense that Cyprus is an island. So once Otello and Desdemona and Iago and Emilia have all arrived on this island, somehow there's nowhere for them to go. You can't leave this place.
And you can't leave the conflict that's created there.
No, and so the maelstrom that's whipped up by Iago is somehow all the more potent, and maybe can only work because there isn't anywhere to go.